Early one misty morning, Farmer Caleb Turner stepped out of his wooden farmhouse and breathed in the cool air that always came before sunrise. The sky was a soft gray, painted with long, thin streaks of pink. Birds had not yet begun their morning songs, and the whole farm seemed to be holding its breath. Caleb always loved this quiet hour. It was the only time of day when the world felt still and gentle, as if it wanted to whisper secrets only he could hear. Caleb adjusted his jacket, grabbed his old thermos of warm tea, and made his way toward the fields. The ground was still a little damp from the night's dew, and every step he took made the grass bend and sparkle under his boots. His farm stretched far, rolling fields on one side, tall trees on the other, and an old wooden fence line at the very back. Most people in town thought the fence marked the end of his property, but Caleb knew his land went even beyond that, into a quiet, forgotten patch he rarely visited. Usually, he liked to start his day checking the barns and feeding the animals, but something nudged him to walk toward the far fields instead. He didn't know why. Maybe it was just a feeling, or maybe it was the unusual silence in the air. The kind of silence that felt expectant, as though something was waiting for him. As he walked, he took slow sips of tea and looked around. Everything looked normal. The corn was growing well, the soil was healthy, and the fences stood straight. But the closer he got to the back edge of his land, the more he sensed something strange. The mist seemed thicker there, swirling low to the ground, hiding the area near the old fence. Caleb narrowed his eyes. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Something small and pale was lying near the fence line. He took another step, then another. With each step, the shape became clearer. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a fallen tree branch. It looked like a person. He slowed down, confusion tightening in his chest. Who would be out here this early? And on his land? He picked up his pace, his boots hitting the ground faster now. The figure wasn't moving. The mist curled around it, making it harder to see. Caleb felt his heartbeat thump louder as he approached. Finally, he reached the shape and realized it truly was a person, a young woman lying still on the ground. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't resting. She looked exhausted, her breathing faint but present. Her clothes were dusty, her hair tangled, and her face looked pale from fatigue. But she wasn't hurt in a way that caused fear or alarm, just extremely tired and clearly in need of help. Caleb stopped a foot away, not wanting to frighten her. He lowered himself to one knee, gently placing his thermos on the ground. "Miss," he said softly, "can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then her eyelids fluttered, like she was trying very hard to wake up. Her lips parted slightly, and she made a weak sound, almost too soft to hear. Caleb leaned a little closer, his expression full of concern. "It's okay," he said in a calm voice. "You're safe." The woman's eyes slowly opened. They looked glassy and tired, as if she had been struggling for days without proper rest. She blinked at the sky, confused, before turning her gaze toward Caleb. For a few seconds she just stared at him, unsure who he was or where she even was. Caleb offered a small, gentle smile. "I found you near my fence," he explained quietly. "My name is Caleb Turner. I'm a farmer. Can you tell me your name?" She swallowed weakly, as though even the effort of speaking was difficult. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said one word. "Emily." Caleb nodded, relieved. "All right, Emily. You're going to be okay. I'm going to help you." But as soon as he spoke, Emily's eyes filled with tears. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but quiet tears that slid slowly down the sides of her face. Tears that belonged to someone who had been carrying far too much for far too long. With a shaky breath, she whispered something else, words that made Caleb feel like the air around him had suddenly dropped a few degrees. "Please, end my pain." Her voice was not desperate or dramatic. It was soft, tired, and full of sadness. Not the kind of sadness that comes from one bad day, but the kind that builds up slowly over time until a person feels completely lost. Caleb felt a deep ache in his chest. He had seen tired animals, troubled neighbors, even strangers going through hard times. But he had never seen someone look so completely worn down emotionally, physically, and possibly more than she could express. He sat down beside her, making sure she could see him clearly. "Emily," he said gently, "I'm not going to do anything to hurt you. I promise you that." She closed her eyes, looking like she didn't have the strength to respond. "You're not alone," Caleb continued. "Not anymore. I'm here, and we're going to get you to a safe place." Emily's fingers twitched slightly, as if she wasn't sure whether she believed him. Caleb waited patiently, giving her time to process his presence. The sky grew a little brighter as the sun lifted behind the trees, casting a soft gold glow over the fields. Caleb slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a clean cloth he carried for work. He didn't touch her directly. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but he placed the cloth near her hand in a small gesture of comfort. "Can you sit up?" he asked softly. "Or should I help you?" She tried lifting her head but winced and let it rest back down. It wasn't that she was hurt. She was simply too exhausted to move. "It's all right," Caleb said quickly. "Don't force yourself. I'll help you." With slow, careful movements, he positioned his arms under her shoulders and helped her sit up just enough to lean against him. She didn't protest. She didn't even seem surprised. It was as though her energy had run so low that she could only trust whoever reached out a helping hand. Caleb glanced around to make sure no one else was on the property. The quiet fields stretched endlessly. Mist drifted lazily through the air. Everything looked peaceful, yet the moment felt heavy with importance. He knew he needed to get her proper care. The nearest town wasn't far, and the local clinic always had kind workers who handled delicate situations with care. They would know how to help her recover, physically and emotionally. "Emily," Caleb said softly, "I'm going to take you to the clinic. They'll help you feel better. You don't have to go through this alone." She opened her eyes just enough to give him a tired, uncertain look, as if she wanted to believe him but wasn't sure she could trust hope anymore. Caleb carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, not because she was weak but because she felt fragile, like a person who had carried invisible burdens, far heavier than her own weight. He held her gently, making sure she was steady. As he walked toward his truck, Emily rested her head lightly against his shoulder. She whispered something, though he couldn't make out the words. It wasn't a plea anymore. It wasn't sadness. It sounded more like relief, or maybe the first small step toward it. The morning sun slowly peeled away the mist, revealing the full stretch of Caleb's land. The fields glowed softly, almost as if welcoming the fragile hope growing silently between the two strangers. Caleb opened the passenger door and helped Emily settle inside. She closed her eyes again, tired, but no longer lost. He buckled the seatbelt around her with gentle hands, making sure she was comfortable. Then he climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and began the journey toward town, toward safety, toward help, and toward the beginning of a story neither of them expected to be part of that morning. And as the truck rolled down the dirt road, Caleb cast one last glance at the field where he had found her. Something in him knew that meeting Emily that morning was no accident. Something had guided him there, and he was determined to see her through whatever came next. The drive toward town felt longer than usual, even though the road itself was familiar to Farmer Caleb Turner. Most days, he drove this path without thinking, past the tall willow tree, across the narrow wooden bridge, and along the winding road lined with old fences and wildflowers. But today felt different. Every second felt heavier. Every mile felt important. Caleb kept one hand on the steering wheel and one eye on Emily, who sat quietly in the passenger seat. She still looked tired, her eyelids drooping as though staying awake took great effort. She held the cloth he had given her earlier, gently twisting its edges between her fingers. Even that small movement seemed to calm her a little. The morning sun had risen higher, warming the road and filling the truck with soft golden light. Emily blinked slowly at the brightness, then looked out the window. She didn't say much, only breathed softly, as if saving every bit of strength she had left. Caleb spoke first, keeping his voice calm and steady. "How are you feeling, Emily?" She pressed her lips together for a moment before replying, "Just tired." Her voice was faint, but clearer than before. "That's all right," Caleb said softly. "You don't need to talk much. Just rest. We'll be in town soon." Emily nodded weakly. Her eyes drifted back to the window, watching the tall grass swaying in the breeze. For a few minutes, silence filled the truck. Not uncomfortable silence, but gentle and peaceful. Then Caleb asked carefully, "Do you remember how you got out to my field?" Emily didn't answer right away. Her brow tightened a little, as though she was trying to remember something difficult. After a long pause, she said, "I was walking for a long time. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to keep moving." Caleb didn't ask more. He didn't want to pressure her. Instead, he nodded slowly, reassuring her with his calm presence. The town was still about 15 minutes away, but Caleb felt the distance stretch and twist inside him. He worried about Emily, about what she had gone through, about what she needed, about how fragile she looked sitting beside him. He wanted to help her. He just hoped she would let him. When the truck rolled over a small bump in the road, Emily shifted in her seat, pressing her back gently against the door, as if she needed support. Her breathing grew uneven for a moment, and Caleb immediately slowed the truck. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded but didn't speak. The morning light revealed soft shadows under her eyes, signs of sleepless nights, long days, and too many worries carried alone. Caleb remembered her whisper from earlier, the one filled with so much exhaustion it had chilled him. He didn't want her to feel that way again. Not now. Not ever. "Emily," he said quietly, "I know you've been through something difficult, but you're not alone now. We'll make sure you're safe. The clinic staff are good people. They'll take care of you." This time, Emily slowly turned her head toward him. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else, something like hope, though fragile as a tiny flame. She whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me there." 3. Caleb felt warmth spread through his chest. "No one should be left alone when they need help," he replied. "I'm glad I found you." Emily looked down at her hands, twisting the cloth again. She seemed unsure how to respond, like she wasn't used to kindness. Caleb wished he knew what to say, but he understood that some people carried invisible stories that took time to tell. A few minutes later, the truck approached the old wooden bridge that crossed a quiet stream. Water glimmered below, catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. The peaceful sight seemed to ease some of Emily's tension. Caleb glanced at her again. "Emily, do you have family nearby? Anyone I should call?" Her expression tightened slightly, and she looked back out the window. "No," she whispered. "Not here." Caleb didn't ask anything else. He could feel that the question touched a tender part of her heart. Instead, he kept driving, letting the soft hum of the engine fill the quiet. As they neared town, signs of life appeared, smoke drifting from chimneys, the distant sound of morning chatter. The old clock tower on the main street striking 8 times. People were starting their day, unaware of the small miracle happening in Caleb's truck. Emily sat up a little straighter, her shoulders stiffening. Towns and crowds could feel intimidating, especially when someone was already overwhelmed. Caleb noticed instantly. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'll stay with you the whole time. You won't be alone for a single second." Emily nodded, but her fingers trembled slightly as she held the cloth. She took a slow, shaky breath. "I'm just nervous," she admitted quietly. "That's all right," Caleb said with a reassuring smile. "Anyone would be. The clinic folks are kind. They help people every day." They passed old brick shops, small houses, and a bakery that filled the street with the smell of warm bread. Emily stared at the buildings, like she hadn't been around a town for a long time. Caleb wondered how long she had been wandering before collapsing in his field. Finally, the white building of the town clinic came into view, a small, cozy place, with flower pots near the entrance and bright windows that made it look welcoming. Caleb parked in the closest spot and turned off the engine. "Emily," he said softly, "we're here. Take your time." She took a deep breath, steadying herself before nodding. Caleb stepped out first, walked around the truck, and opened her door. He reached out his hand, not touching her, but offering support. Emily looked at his hand for a moment before slowly placing hers in his, trusting him to help her. Her legs were unsteady when she tried to stand. Caleb held her arm gently, supporting her weight without making her feel small or helpless. She straightened with effort, breathing carefully. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though she still leaned slightly on him. Together, they walked toward the clinic doors. Inside, the reception area was warm and bright. A nurse behind the desk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-lined hair, immediately noticed them. "Oh my," she said, standing up quickly. "What happened?" Caleb answered gently before Emily had to speak. "I found her on my property. She's exhausted and needs care." The nurse smiled warmly at Emily. "You're safe here, sweetheart. Come with me." Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking between the nurse and Caleb. Caleb gave a small nod. "It's all right. I'll be right here." The nurse gently guided Emily toward a comfortable chair near the intake area. Another staff member brought her a glass of water. Emily held it with both hands to stop the trembling, taking small sips. Caleb stayed nearby, watching carefully but respectfully, giving her space. He wanted her to feel secure, not overwhelmed. After a few minutes, the nurse asked softly, "Emily, do you mind if we ask you a few questions? Only what you feel comfortable answering." Emily looked at Caleb again, and he stepped closer. "I'm right here," he reassured her. She nodded and answered each question slowly, giving only the information she felt safe sharing. The staff didn't push or rush her. They spoke gently, like they understood she needed patience, not pressure. When the brief intake was finished, the nurse smiled kindly. "We're going to help you get some rest and something warm to eat. You're in good hands." Emily gave a tiny nod. Her eyes looked softer than before, still tired, still fragile, but a little more trusting. Before they led her to one of the quiet rooms, she turned to Caleb and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Caleb felt a deep warmth in his heart. "You're welcome," he said softly. "You deserve care." As Emily was guided down the hallway toward a peaceful room where she could rest, Caleb stood quietly in the lobby. He knew this was just the beginning of her healing, but he also knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to walk away now. When Emily was taken to a quiet room inside the clinic, Caleb remained in the small waiting area. He sat down on one of the wooden chairs, which creaked softly under his weight, and rested his hands on his knees. The room smelled faintly of clean soap and fresh flowers. Someone had placed a vase of daisies on the table near the window. The morning sun now warmed the floor tiles and brightened the room. People walked in and out from time to time, greeting the nurses or picking up medicine. But Caleb's thoughts remained on Emily. He couldn't forget the look she had given him before disappearing down the hallway, a look filled with both fear and trust. It was a heavy combination, one that made his heart tighten with responsibility. He kept replaying the moment he had found her in the field. How pale she had looked. How tired her voice had been. How fragile her words sounded. As if even speaking took energy she hardly had. Caleb had no idea what she had gone through, but he knew she needed kindness, patience, and a safe place to rest. A young doctor entered the waiting area, reading from a clipboard. When he noticed Caleb sitting alone, he walked over with a warm smile. "You're the one who brought Emily in, right?" the doctor asked. Yes, Caleb said, standing up politely. How is she doing? The doctor nodded thoughtfully. She's very tired and a little overwhelmed, but physically she's stable. She needs rest, proper meals, and a calm environment for a while. We're giving her that. Caleb felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you. She seemed worn out. She's been through a lot, the doctor said gently. But she's safe now. We'll keep an eye on her. And it helps that she trusts you. Sometimes, a familiar face means more than medicine. Caleb nodded. He didn't feel like a hero, just someone who had shown up at the right moment. But hearing that he had made a difference warmed him more than he expected. After the doctor left, Caleb decided to stay a little longer, sitting quietly with his hands folded. Outside the clinic window, people walked by with baskets of groceries. Children laughed near the fountain, and a soft breeze rustled the trees. Life continued in its simple rhythm, unaware of the fragile story unfolding inside the small clinic room. About an hour later, the same nurse who had first greeted them approached Caleb with a gentle smile. She's resting now, the nurse said softly. But she asked if you're still here. Caleb stood up immediately. Yes, of course. Can I see her? If you promise to be quiet and calm, the nurse said kindly, you can see her for a little while. Caleb nodded. The nurse led him through a narrow hallway with framed paintings on the walls, flowers, fields, and peaceful landscapes that made the place feel warm and welcoming. When they reached the small room near the end of the hall, the nurse pushed the door open quietly. Emily was lying on a soft bed, covered with a light blanket. The room was cozy, with gentle sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. A tray with warm soup sat on the table beside her, untouched. She looked peaceful but still slightly tense, as if even rest required effort. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard the door. When she saw Caleb, her expression softened. You stayed, she whispered. Caleb stepped inside, keeping his voice gentle. Of course. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Emily looked around the room, taking in the comfort and calm. Caleb smiled. You need quiet. You've had too many hard days recently. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands, resting lightly on the blanket. Her fingers moved slowly, as if she was thinking through each word before speaking. Caleb, she began, her voice soft and unsure. I didn't mean to trouble you. You didn't trouble me, Caleb said immediately. You needed help. Anyone would have done the same. Emily shook her head gently. Not everyone stops. Some people just walk past others who need help. Caleb took a slow breath. Well, I'm not one of those people. She met his eyes again. And for the first time since he had found her, Caleb saw a faint spark. Small, delicate, but real. Hope. It was like a tiny candle trying to stay lit inside her. A soft knock came at the door, and the nurse peeked in. Emily, dear, try to eat a little, she said kindly. Just a few spoonfuls if you can. Emily nodded politely, though she looked unsure about the food. Caleb stepped closer to the tray. I can stay while you eat, he offered gently. Emily hesitated but then nodded. Caleb brought the tray closer and helped her hold the bowl. The soup was simple, warm, gentle, and perfect for someone who needed comfort more than anything else. Emily took a small sip, then another. Thank you, she whispered between tiny spoonfuls. Caleb shook his head softly. You don't have to thank me. Just focus on getting better. After she finished a few more bites, she leaned back against the pillows, looking tired but calmer. Caleb placed the tray aside and sat in the chair beside her bed. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, like the calm after a long storm. Emily's breathing grew steady, and her eyes drifted slowly toward the window where sunlight made faint patterns on the floor. Then, in a small voice, Emily said, I was walking through the woods for days. I kept thinking I should stop, but something kept pushing me forward. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I was going. I one of the 44. I only knew I needed to reach someone kind. Caleb listened attentively, his heart growing heavier but tender. I just didn't want to feel lost anymore, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Everything felt too heavy. You don't have to share anything you're not ready to talk about, Caleb said softly. I know, Emily said. But I want you to understand why I was in your field. Caleb nodded, staying patient and quiet. I walked until I couldn't walk anymore, she said. When I saw the open field, I felt relief. It was the first open space I'd seen in days. I thought maybe someone lived nearby. But I was so tired. I just collapsed. Caleb felt a deep ache for her, not pity, but a gentle respect for the strength it must have taken for her to keep going. I'm glad you made it that far, he said. A tear slipped down Emily's cheek. But it wasn't a tear of fear. It was soft, quiet, almost grateful. She wiped it away quickly. I didn't expect anyone to find me, she whispered. But when you spoke to me, your voice felt safe. Caleb felt something warm move through him. Not pride, something more humble. The simple comfort of knowing he had made a difference. Emily, he said gently, you're safe now. The clinic will help you heal. And whatever you need, whatever you choose to share or not share, it's all up to you. No pressure. Emily nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. A soft peace began to settle into the room, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. For the first time since arriving, Emily leaned her head gently to the side, closing her eyes not because she felt defeated, but because she felt safe enough to rest. Her breathing grew calm, almost rhythmic. Caleb watched her quietly, making sure she was comfortable. As she drifted to sleep, he whispered softly more to himself than to her. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time in a long while, Emily slept peacefully, knowing someone cared enough to stay. 2 days passed, each one brighter and calmer than the last. Emily spent most of her time resting at the clinic, slowly regaining her strength. The nurses spoke gently to her. The doctor checked on her often, and every afternoon, Caleb visited her with a warm smile and a basket of small comforts. Fresh fruit, soft blankets, or sometimes a simple note reminding her that she wasn't alone. Emily had begun to change in small but visible ways. Her eyes looked a little clearer. Her shoulders relaxed a bit more. Her voice, though still soft, had gained a tiny spark of confidence each time she spoke. She even managed a few smiles, small ones, but real. Caleb felt relieved every time he saw these signs of improvement. He had grown protective of her, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. He wanted to see her rebuild her life, step by gentle step. One evening, after visiting hours, Caleb drove back to his farm. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in orange and pink shades. The fields glowed softly, and distant birds called to each other as they returned to their nests. Caleb parked his truck near the barn and stepped out, stretching his tired arms. He expected everything to be as peaceful as usual, but something felt slightly different the moment his boots touched the ground. The air felt still, not the calm, comforting stillness he loved, but a tense quietness, like a question waiting to be answered. He paused, listening. The animals were calm, the wind was soft, but there was a subtle sense that something had been disturbed. Caleb trusted his instincts. Years of working the land had taught him to notice even the smallest changes. He walked to the barn, intending to check the animals before heading inside to make dinner. As he approached the door, he noticed something unusual. A faint movement behind the barn. A quick shadow that didn't match the trees or the evening light. Caleb stopped, his heart beating steadily but alert. He wasn't alarmed, just cautious. He took a slow breath and stepped toward the side of the barn. "Hello?" he called gently. There was no answer. Only the soft rustle of leaves and the chirping of distant crickets. He moved a little closer. The ground near the barn showed signs of fresh footprints, nothing dramatic or concerning, just clear enough to show someone had passed by recently. It could have been a traveler, a lost visitor, or even someone looking for a place to rest. His farm sat close to the countryside, and people sometimes wandered through without meaning any harm. Still, Caleb felt the need to know who had been on his property. He walked slowly, his steps calm and steady. He didn't want to frighten anyone, especially if it was someone in need. The sky had darkened further, and the shadows near the barn had grown long and soft. When he rounded the corner, he finally saw the figure. A man stood a short distance away, near the fence. He looked tired and out of place, as if he had been traveling for a long time. His clothes were dusty, and his hair looked unkempt. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just standing there, breathing unevenly, as if trying to gather his thoughts. Caleb felt his chest tighten slightly. He knew immediately that this man wasn't from the town. He also sensed something else: uncertainty, confusion, and perhaps frustration on the man's face. But most importantly, he sensed that this man was looking for someone. Caleb maintained a respectful distance and spoke in a calm voice. "Evenin'," he said. "Can I help you with something?" The man turned. His eyes looked worn out, as though he hadn't slept well in days. He hesitated before answering, like he was unsure whether to speak the truth. I'm looking for someone," the man said. His voice was quiet, rough around the edges. "A young woman. She's been missing." Caleb felt the weight of those words settle inside him. He didn't react visibly, but inside, his thoughts began to connect in a heavy, quiet way. "Emily," the man continued, taking a slow step forward, not aggressively, but with uncertainty. "We got separated," he said. "I've been searching everywhere. In the woods, near the roads. I was hoping she might have passed through here." Caleb stayed calm. He didn't want to jump to conclusions or make assumptions. He simply nodded, keeping his voice steady. "What's her name?" he asked. "Emily," the man replied softly. "Her name is Emily." The evening breeze passed between them, carrying a gentle but heavy silence. Caleb took a moment before speaking again. "Why are you looking for her?" The man looked down at his hands, twisting them nervously. "Because I'm worried about her. She left suddenly. She didn't have much with her. I've been hoping she reached somewhere safe." His voice cracked, not in anger, but in tiredness and emotion. Caleb studied him carefully. The man didn't look dangerous. He didn't look threatening. He looked worried, exhausted, and lost, much like Emily had looked when Caleb first found her. Still, Caleb knew Emily was fragile. He didn't know if she felt safe with this man, or if seeing him might overwhelm her. Before saying anything else, Caleb spoke gently but firmly. The man's eyes widened, filling with relief. "You've seen her? Is she all right?" "She's being taken care of," Caleb said, choosing his words carefully. "She's resting. She's tired, but she's in good hands." The man placed a hand over his chest, letting out a long breath. "Thank goodness. I was so worried." He leaned lightly against the fence, as if his legs needed a moment to recover from the relief. Caleb stepped a little closer, not intrusively, but with quiet authority. "Before we go any further, I need to know something." The man looked up. "What is it?" "Emily has been through a hard time," Caleb said kindly. "She needs peace. She needs calmness. So before anyone approaches her, I need to know, will seeing you bring her comfort? Or will it make things harder for her?" The man's eyes softened with sadness. He nodded slowly. "I understand. I just want her to be okay. If she doesn't want to see me, I'll leave quietly. I won't cause any trouble." Caleb felt sincerity in those words. A gentle honesty that made him believe the man truly cared for Emily's well-being. "All right," Caleb said softly. "Come with me in the morning. We'll speak with the clinic staff. And if Emily wants to see you, she will. If she needs more time, you'll need to respect that." The man nodded. "I will. Thank you." They walked back toward the farmhouse together, the evening sky fading into deeper shades of purple and blue. Caleb felt a calm sense of clarity. This situation was delicate, like holding a fragile glass ornament in both hands. But he trusted kindness. He trusted patience. He trusted Emily's strength to decide what was best for her. When they reached the porch, Caleb offered the man a safe place to stay for the night, an empty guest room he sometimes used for family visits. The man accepted quietly, grateful, and tired. As Caleb prepared the room, his thoughts remained on Emily. He hoped she would feel ready to face what tomorrow might bring, but he also knew that if she needed more time, he would stand by her without hesitation. Tomorrow would be a day of truth. A day when past and present gently met. A day when Emily would decide what steps she wanted to take next. The days that followed were calm, almost peaceful, as if the world itself wanted to give Emily space to breathe after everything she had been through. She was staying in a safe community center in town, a warm place with kind staff who made sure she always felt protected and supported. For the first time in many days, she was able to sleep without fear or worry. She often sat by the window in her room, watching the sunlight fall across the yard and feeling thankful that she had finally found safety. Caleb visited her a few times at the center. He always came with a quiet smile, not wanting to overwhelm her, but wanting her to know she wasn't alone. Emily would greet him warmly, and even though she didn't speak much at first, her eyes always softened when she saw him. She felt a sense of gratitude toward him that was hard to put into words. He was the person who had helped her when she felt she had nothing left. He was the one who had chosen compassion at a moment when she believed the world had turned its back on her. One afternoon, when the sun was beginning to set and the sky was turning orange, Emily asked if they could sit outside in the center's small garden. The flowers were in full bloom, and a soft breeze moved through the air. They sat together on a wooden bench, and for a while, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the colors of the sky change, letting the quiet settle comfortably between them. Finally, Emily turned to him. "I never got to thank you properly," she said, her voice gentle but steady. "You helped me when I couldn't help myself." Caleb shook his head. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "Anyone would have done the same." Everyone. Emily smiled softly. "I don't think so," she said. "Not everyone looks at a stranger and chooses kindness. But you did. And because of you, I got a second chance." Her words touched him more deeply than he admitted. He had always lived a simple life, believing in honesty, patience, and quiet strength. But he had never imagined that a single choice one morning, in a field, during a simple routine would change someone's life so much. He didn't feel like a hero, and he didn't want the praise the townspeople were giving him. To him, helping someone was simply the right thing to do. The next few weeks were full of new beginnings for Emily. With support from counselors and volunteers, she started planning her future. She wanted to continue her education and perhaps find a small place of her own someday. She joined a few group activities at the center, which helped her build confidence. People around her noticed how strong she was becoming, how her quiet courage was returning step by step. She was healing, not only physically, but in her heart as well. Caleb kept in touch but made sure not to crowd her space. Sometimes he brought fresh vegetables from his farm or homemade bread from his neighbor's bakery. Other times, he simply stopped by to sit with her for a few minutes. Their conversations grew more relaxed and easy. She told him little stories from her life, things she enjoyed, foods she liked, dreams she once had. He listened without judgment, giving her the comfort of being heard. The town also became a gentle source of support for her. People would wave when they saw her walking with the staff, and the shopkeepers treated her with warmth. She felt like she had stepped into a place where kindness grew naturally. The world didn't feel so heavy anymore. Slowly, day by day, she began believing in herself again. One morning, Emily asked if she could visit Caleb's farm. She felt strong enough, and she wanted to see the place where everything had changed for her. Caleb agreed, making sure she felt comfortable. He picked her up in his old truck, and as they drove through the quiet road surrounded by tall trees, she took a deep breath. The fresh country air filled her lungs, and she felt more alive than she had in a long time. When they reached the farm, she stepped out slowly, taking in the wide fields, the barn, the soft clucking of chickens wandering near the fence. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time that day. It felt different being there. Not frightened or lost, but hopeful and steady. "This place is beautiful," she said, turning to Caleb. "It's simple," he replied with a small grin, "but it's home." She walked around a bit, looking at the crops, the small wooden shed, and the open sky stretching across the land. It felt peaceful, almost healing. She paused near the fence line, remembering the moment she first collapsed there. But instead of fear, she felt grateful. It was strange how a place that had once been connected to her pain could now feel connected to her new beginning. Caleb walked up beside her. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes. Actually, I'm better than okay." They stood there silently again, but this time the silence was full of calmness and understanding. She didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down on her. She felt light, like she could move forward freely. After their visit, Emily returned to the center with a renewed sense of determination. She joined a class that helped her build life skills, and she set small goals for herself each week. She learned how to stay positive, how to trust again, and how to rebuild her confidence. Everyone around her could see the changes. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was growing. Caleb continued checking in on her. Sometimes he invited her to community events, like small fairs or farmers markets. She enjoyed being part of the cheerful gatherings, surrounded by friendly people and lively music. She felt included again, part of something good. As time went on, Emily found herself smiling more often, laughing more freely. She discovered new interests: reading, gardening, helping others at the center. She also formed new friendships. She wasn't defined by her past anymore. She was shaping a new story for herself, one filled with hope, strength, and possibility. One evening at the center, the staff organized a small celebration for residents who had shown great progress. Emily was one of those people. She was given a small certificate that read, "Courage and Growth." When her name was announced, she felt a warm wave of emotion. She looked around the room and saw people clapping for her, cheering her on. And in the back of the room stood Caleb, smiling proudly. After the event, she walked over to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For believing in me, before I even believed in myself." Caleb nodded. "You did the hard work," he said. "You found your strength again." Emily knew he meant it, and that made his words even more meaningful. She felt a deep sense of appreciation not only for what he had done for her in the beginning, but for the quiet support he continued to offer as she rebuilt her life. Months later, Emily eventually moved into a small apartment not far from town. It was cozy, with warm lighting, and a few plants she cared for lovingly. She invited Caleb over one day for a simple dinner she had cooked herself. They talked about their lives, their hopes, and the peaceful paths ahead of them. They had become good friends, bonded not by fear or sadness, but by trust, kindness, and understanding. Emily's journey was far from easy, but she was living proof that a gentle hand, a kind heart, and a moment of compassion could change everything. She often thought about the day she had whispered for her pain to end. Now, she understood that what she truly needed was safety, comfort, and a chance to start over. And because of one farmer's quiet act of kindness, she got exactly that. In the end, Emily found a life filled with hope, surrounded by people who supported her. Caleb continued living his simple life on the farm, always ready to help others when needed. And Emily carried forward a strength she never knew she had, becoming an example of resilience for everyone around her. Her story became a reminder that sometimes, the smallest act of care could be the beginning of someone's healing. She walked into the future not with fear, but with confidence and courage, grateful for the second chance that had changed her life forever.